Welcome back to the final show of 2022. This is the BTR Boxing Podcast Network end of year show. Johnston, you are back on this episode to round out the year of what has been a mixed bag of tricks, and as always we do our awards show during the course of the end of year show, and we've also got some of our favourite moments to talk about through the course of the year, stuff that we've done on previous podcasts or the series based content, and just sort of moments we've genuinely enjoyed throughout the course of the last 12 months. But you know, it's a pleasure to be doing another end of year show with you, because it just means that we've been doing another year together on this podcast, and the years just seem to be falling like the rain. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's going really quickly actually. Well, I think the first one was it 2019. I think it might have been 2019 or 2020. So yeah, I've immensely enjoyed it, and obviously another year of boxing to go through, which is always great fun. Some hugely controversial moments of the year, which we can mention, as well as obviously your normal fighters of the year, etc. You know, all the nice stuff that we do. So yeah, another good year boxing. I suppose it's had its flaws, but it makes it interesting discussion, doesn't it, between us two for the year. But look, another year, so let's say cheers to that.
Definitely cheers to that. It's been a pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure doing the podcast this year, and not just obviously with yourself. We've had Lukey, Jamie's come on a couple of times quite recently, and filled in for yourself. So it's been nice to have obviously some different opinions on the show, and different people getting involved in the show this year. So it's been really nice that we've had a real different variety. But it's back to the old school. It's been us two for the past few years, so you know we can't not do an end of year show without us two doing it together, and obviously going through everything that we've enjoyed this year. So as I was saying, awards. So before we get into the awards itself, we always try to add these into some of our other shows, and what we like to kind of do is acknowledge where certain things have happened, you know, within the sport. And I'm talking about notable people within boxing that have passed, and these are the most notable ones I think that maybe we have certainly picked up on this year. And I apologise in advance, because I'm pretty sure there is probably more that we've completely failed to get into this episode. But the three that we have, first of all, is Ernie Shavers. Now, that was a huge loss for the boxing world. Now, this was the same Ernie Shavers, the former world heavyweight title challenger. He passed away September the 1st, 2022, a day after turning 78. He was active as a fighter from 1969 to 1995, and he retired from the sport with a record of 74-14-1, with 68 by way of knockout. Now, Ernie challenged for the heavyweight title on two occasions during his career, losing a 15-round unanimous decision to Muhammad Ali on September the 29th, 1977, and then suffered an 11th round stoppage to Larry Holmes on September the 28th, 1979. Both Ali and Holmes, well, they raved about Shavers' punching power. Former world heavyweight champion George Foreman, another feared puncher during the 1970s golden era of boxing, had actually stated in a televised interview that "I never fought Ernie Shavers. Thank goodness." Now, in 1975, Shavers lost a memorable bout against Ron Lyle in a fight where both boxers were down. Some of Shavers' big wins included first-round knockout of Ken Norton in 1979, a first-round knockout of Jimmy Ellis in 1973, and a third-round stoppage of Jimmy Young in 1973. Now, Ernie Shavers is also a character within this sport that we have certainly enjoyed talking about on many different occasions. He came up in one of our patron-only episode in the hardest punchers of all time, and you know, he's always a pleasure to talk about, and he's always one of them fighters where you feel like he was a really, really good fighter, but just never quite good enough to win that title. But I think that was down to the fact that who he was in the era with. You know, it's not like today where you've got only a few standout fighters. He was in an era with so many standout fighters, it was untrue. So for him to not win a title is a bit of a travesty. But then you always think of them what if moments. What if he was, you know, fighting in this particular era? You'd think to yourself, he would surely, in this four belt era, he would have been a champion.
He would have been a champion. There's no doubt about it. And everyone would have said how much of a devastating puncher he was, like they do with Deontay Wilder. Ernie Shavers is just unfortunate that he was in such a difficult era, the golden era. Some people consider it to be. I mean, we do. It's sort of in between the 60s and 70s. It's a tough year, and obviously moving into the 80s was just tricky for a guy like Ernie Shavers. But I mean, a great loss. Only in September we lost him. 78 years old though. It was a good innings, I suppose, but still quite young. But for a boxer, it's actually not too bad. But yeah, R.I.P. Ernie Shavers. So there's a couple of other more deaths, notable deaths. As Sean said, there are other deaths, obviously, but these are two referees we want to mention. So the first one I'm going to jump on is Mills Lane, one of the most famous referees in boxing history. Died on December the 6th, 2022, at the age of 85. Lane, famous for his catchphrase, if I get it right, let's get it on. Refereed many famous fights, including the notorious bite fight with Mike Tyson, obviously decided to have a munch on Holyfield's ear. Lane refereed more than 100 world title fights in his career. The final championship fight worked by Lane came on August 1998 when he accidentally shoved Bernard Hopkins as well in the ring while breaking up a clinch and injured him. I'm sure many remember that one. He worked in addition to that year, that Hopkins injury and the bite fight. Lane was the third man in the ring when Oliver McCall suffered that nervous breakdown against Lennox Lewis. He was also refereeing the fan man fight where obviously the guy parachuted in during Riddick Bowe and Evander Holyfield's rematch, and Lane's profile continued to elevate when he was recreated in a clay motion form as the referee on MTV Celebrity Deathmatch. I'm sure we all remember that, and probably where we all remember Let's Get It On as well for some of the younger viewers. But Lane was inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame in 2013 as well. But a very famous referee, distinctive look about him. No nonsense ref. Some moaned about him, but many liked him.
Many did like him. I remember him from Celebrity Deathmatch. Not mainly from Celebrity Deathmatch, but I remember him being involved in that. I remember him from obviously the bite fight and a couple of fights around that time. And obviously, his main sort of title fights that he did were sort of as we were growing up as kids, so it was sort of when we was in and out of the sport really, as young kids we were into football and other sports at the time. But yeah, I do remember him. I do remember the bite fight. I do remember the Celebrity Deathmatch stuff. So he was very fondly remembered and very well revered by the boxing world. And so is the other referee that's only just passed away as well, Steve Smuger, the International Boxing Hall of Fame referee. He died on the 19th, only the start of the week as we're recording this. Such a shame. After a long illness, unfortunately, at the age of 79. In 1984, he began his career as a professional referee there, and 2 years later, 1986, he officiated his first world title fight, an IBF flyweight battle in South Korea. In over 3 decades in boxing, Smuger was the third man in the ring for nearly 200 title bouts and officiated worldwide. He was the judge for such notable contests as Mike McCallum versus Tony, the first fight, Holmes versus Mercer, Jones Jr. versus Hopkins, Pazienza versus Duran, the second fight, Mickey Ward versus Emmanuel Augustus, Hopkins versus Trinidad, Forrest versus Mosley 1, Pavlik versus Taylor 1, Andre Ward versus Froch, Andre Ward versus Dawson, and Danny Garcia and Zab Judah. So many notable title fights. He was then inducted into the non-participant category of the International Boxing Hall of Fame in 2015. I think that loss quite recently has been felt hard by a lot of people, around the area that he was from. I think a lot of people really sort of seen him as a real notable figure. So, another sort of major name within the sport that has unfortunately had Father Time call upon him this year. Again, 79 years of age. You think to yourself, well, he's lived a long innings there, but then you think there's people that live till like in the 90s these days. It's crazy, isn't it, when you look back on it? But very notable referee, and another one that we've lost in the sport. Such a shame that time passes on and these people do eventually have to go, and unfortunately it's just a part of life. But yeah, they're sort of 3 notable mentions we wanted to bring up, and again, apologies if we've missed any off this particular list, but I know there are a few sort of lower I don't say the lower notable, but I mean like in the sense that there are notable names but maybe not as notable as these ones for you guys that are particularly listening. So should we get into the awards part of the show then, Johnston? Should we go on to the awards that we wanted to hand out and the talking points that surround our decisions regarding some of these particular awards? And not without controversy here on the BTR Boxing Podcast Network, we're going to start with the most controversial moments of the year. So, looking down the list, we've put a few notable incidents that have occurred this year. These are just our own opinions, by the way. These are not, a thing where we've tried to encapsulate every single controversial moment throughout the course of the year, because you could have added quite a lot more in, but it was these three in particular moments for us that really struck a chord with us and certainly gave us many talking points throughout our shows through the course of the year. So the three that we've added to our list is Josh Taylor against Jack Catterall in February earlier this year, the controversial decision that saw Josh Taylor retaining his titles. Conor Benn failing a drugs test was a hugely controversial moment in Britain this year. And Tyson Fury fighting Derek Chisora, the fight nobody wanted to see. Another controversial moment, given the fact that there were negotiations with Anthony Joshua going on, then Alexander Usyk, and it just bit of a lacklustre year really in terms of the Tyson Fury story. So three controversial moments that we've listed that we've seen and we've talked so much about this year, but ultimately which one of them, Johnston, stands out to you as the most controversial?
Oh mate, I mean, look, just starting with the lowest, I suppose, Tyson Fury, Derek Chisora was a fight that no one wanted to see. I think the lead up to that with his interview was thoroughly entertaining, wasn't it? We enjoyed that. So that was all sort of part of it. And obviously the other controversy was that it wasn't Fury against Joshua, which we wanted to see. So that was sort of, it all adds into one big package, really, that trilogy fight. And in the end, the fight was a nonsense, really, wasn't it? It was a disastrous fight. I didn't enjoy it, didn't enjoy the show. In fact, I fell asleep to it. So most controversial, probably not. I'd say the next two are definitely the most controversial. Conor Benn, obviously, that failed test. I mean, have we even heard about this B sample yet? Would be the first question that springs to my mind. I haven't read anything.
Nothing.
He says a lot on Twitter. Yeah, I mean, and he says a lot on Twitter. He hasn't actually said much else. So I don't really follow the guy on to see what interviews he does and stuff. But I know that it was a sham. The whole thing was a disgrace, really. But it's boxing. Boxing's always been like that. When we do career profiles, Dark Side of Boxing Legendary Acts, there's always controversy at some point, and there's always someone trying to pull the wool over your eyes, and promoters are the worst for it. And obviously that all, and then Conor's failed test as well. It was all just a big mess, wasn't it? And then in boxing terms, I mean, the Josh Taylor and Jack Catterall fight was a disaster. Everyone called it out, which was good to see. It was on a boxer card, but Ben Shalom, even credit to him, he came out and sort of made inquiries. He said there needs to be inquiries, and Ian John Lewis has been struck off. We ain't seen him since. So there's a lot of controversy involved in that fight. But I mean, look, if I was going to go for the most controversial moment, just in general, I think Conor Benn, in terms of how that's gone and how it's still going. And then I'll have Josh Taylor and Catterall in second, because that was just a joke of a fight. Catterall won that fight quite convincingly and clearly, and how on earth he didn't come away with those titles, I'll never know. But they are having a rematch, so we'll see what happens. But how about you, Sean?
I think it's got to be Conor Benn and his failed drugs test. I think the problem with the whole debacle of it, that's still not been resolved, of course, yet, as we do this end-of-year show, is the fact that, the fight with Eubank was a controversy to start with. The fact that Conor Benn was going to be coming up weights and Eubank was going to be dropping down to a catch weight, and, the physical condition he got himself into as well, Eubank, was testament to him. And what we said in the aftermath of this was the fact that Eubank came out of it smelling of roses, rather than him being the villain, which is normally what he's typecast as in these types of fights. But because of what happened and the way it was all very shady, the way it was leaked, and it wasn't actually made public knowledge until it was leaked, and it made you think, well, hang on a minute, if this wouldn't have leaked, would they have even told us about it? And this fight could have gone on without any knowledge of this actually happening, and it sounded like behind the scenes the parties involved would have let it happen, even including Eubank's team. It sounds like they were happy to let it happen as well, and the fact that they were pushing for the fight, the fact that Eddie Hearn was trying to justify the fact that the fight could still go on, I think it just left an absolute huge skid mark on the underpants of boxing this year. And I think for me, it was definitely the most controversial moment of the year, because of the fact that even now we still don't really have an answer. Everybody has made their assumptions now, including ourselves, about Conor Benn and where his career's at, and the questionable victories he's had recently over world-class opposition. it really just put this big stain on him as well. And until he comes out with some concrete evidence and says that and proves that he's completely innocent of all wrongdoing, then at the moment, he's kind of guilty until he can prove himself innocent. So it is, the opposite way around and to what you'd normally think, innocent until proven guilty. But it seems just so corrupt and so dodgy at this time that I think it has to be, for me, and it will stay the most controversial moment of 2022 and possibly even in 2023. We don't know how long this saga is going to take to roll out before we actually get an outcome on this. So yeah, 100% is top of the list for me. But obviously, in terms of boxing elements, if you want to subcategorize these things in terms of actual fights that were controversial this moment, even if I look around the world at other fights that have had some ambiguous scoring that has happened throughout the last 12 months, no fight comes close to Taylor versus Catterall in terms of an overwhelming clear winner in the fight, but has been judged to have gone completely in a different way. And I just feel like until we get closure on this is also, like a bad fart in an elevator situation. I think Josh Taylor needs to, if he's going to get any credibility to his name, he's going to have to do a number on Jack Catterall in their rematch in February. Otherwise, it's just going to make his stock lower. And after all the hard work he put in and all the great fights he was involved in, all the great victories he had to get himself in that position to be undisputed in the super lightweight division, and then for this to happen and him to be so blasé about the fact that he still thinks he won that fight, I think it kind of left a bad taste in boxing fans' mouths. And I think when we get a conclusion to the outcome of this, I think maybe then we can kind of put this to bed. But that's certainly, in terms of actual fights taking place in the ring, that was certainly up there as my sort of number one controversial scorecard this year, or controversial outcome in a fight this year. But Conor Benn, absolutely, it's the worst thing that's happened, I think, in boxing this year. And it's just made people look so bad, especially Hearn. The next category we're going to be doing in a minute, which I'll let you introduce, is all about the promoters of the year. Do I really think that Eddie Hearn could be justified as promoter of the year? Well, I'm telling you now, I've already counted him out of the running for that one.
Yeah, mate, I'm with you. I mean, the one thing as well, the downfall of Conor Benn, we had him as our British Fighter of the Year last year with his impressive victories, and now all of a sudden he falls into that most controversial category, and he won't be getting anywhere near a mention for this year, which just shows you that the difference in within the space of 12 months, how someone can literally go from one end of the spectrum to the other. And even with Josh Taylor, it's only sort of 18 months ago, we probably were calling for him to be one of the fighters of the year. So, and now he needs to prove himself against Catterall. So within 12 months, in the space of 12 months, how dramatic things can change. So yeah, I suppose we better move on to the next one. It falls nicely into that category, which is the promoter of the year. And I mean, you look at I say it's a short list, but it's generally tends to be the promoters that everyone sort of talks about, and we watch a lot of their shows. So you got Al Heyman obviously on PBC, you got Bob Arum Top Rank, you got Eddie Hearn Matchroom, Benjamin Boxer, Frank Warren, our good old mate in Queensborough, Kelly Sutherland, and Probellum, and then obviously you got Golden Boy as well, and you've also got the Japanese. Is it Tak? I always get their name wrong. I'm sure it's Taken Boxer or something like that they're called. Also produce great shows over in Japan. So yeah, look, I mean, promoter of the year. I mean, look, I'll jump straight on Sean. When I look at you said with Matchroom and Eddie, I don't think they have had a good year, to be honest. I think a lot of eggs been smashed in their face. So Eddie Hearn for me definitely won't be there. I think Benjamin's for this year, I think he's overtaken him with Boxer with some of the all-female cards he's produced as well. Frank Warren, I mean, hasn't done much for me. What he pulled out Tyson Fury and White. It's probably the biggest card he had, the biggest event he had this year. I think the contenders are Al Heyman at PBC. I think he's producing most of the decent cards, and Bob Arum at Top Rank. There, not only are they producing big cards from big fighters, they're also getting to point situations where you have top contenders who are going to sort of move on to that next level, and they're facing each other. They're putting them in the ring against each other. But for me, I think probably if I was to pick one, it'd be Al Heyman with PBC. I think he's produced. I mean, you look at we'll come on to some of these fights in a minute, but Fundora Lubin was a great fight this year. Errol Spence against Hugo. It's not a great fight. I don't think it was a great fight, but it was a decent show. and then you got the Charlo and Castano fight as well. So I feel that for me, I think he's got a bit more depth. I think he's produced better nights for myself for this year. I've enjoyed watching PBC, so I would tip PBC for me.
Well, I'm actually going to go a little bit different this year in terms of the way I'm going to go. I know, I could easily go with like the bigger ones and say, a Matchroom or a Queensbury or a PBC, but I don't want to do that this year. And the reason I don't want to do that is because I actually looked, at some of the fights that had been put on this year, and I thought about like, well, who's made like some really high quality fights this year? Who has really come on strong in terms of their stock value from where that stock value was, say, at the start of the year? And if I look down the list of what we've got Al Heyman, Bob Arum, Eddie Hearn, Ben Shalom, Frank Warren, Callie Sauerland and Pro Bellum, and obviously you can add Golden Boy onto that list as well. But the one that stands out for me, surprisingly, and it's probably going to be a surprise to most people listening and watching the video, is I actually think Ben Shalom's done an absolutely excellent job of promoting cards this year and fights this year, and he's made some fights happen this year which we never thought would actually get made, and should have probably got made through the bigger promotional companies. So like earlier in the year, you look down the list and you had Eubank Jr. beating Liam Williams. That was a fight that was being talked about for about 2 or 3 years. Ben Shalom, he made that fight happen. Great fight. You look around at what else he made. Catterall versus Taylor. Another big fight this year, which turned out to be one of the most controversial moments. Khan versus Brook earlier this year as well. The fight that was never going to happen seemingly finally happened, and we finally got it. Again, that was on the Boxer card. You got Natasha Jonas as well in her victories this year, winning titles and really ending the year so well. And then you've got Savannah Marshall, Clarissa Shields, the fight that had been happening for years and years and years, the fight that needed to happen for years and years and years. Again, Boxer and Ben Shalom made that happen. Now, not all the cards were fantastic, like every single promoter out there. Not every single card was fantastic, but the fact that he was able to make some of these big fights that we'd been waiting for a long time, regardless of maybe whether Khan and Brook were past the best, for me, the fact that he was able to make them happen and other promoters couldn't do it, even though they had the opportunity to do it previously, I think that, for me, that kind of meant something in terms of his level of progression as a promoter. And remember, this is a young guy. I think he's about 30 years old, Ben Shalom, and he's come into boxing, he's called things out, he's said what people are thinking about certain things when it comes down to the sport, and I think he's a little bit of a breath of fresh air for me, which is why I've decided to pick him over all the other promoters as the promoter of the year, just because of the sole factors. I think he's put on fights that maybe we weren't expecting to see from a smaller promotional company, and he's been able to call out moments within the sport that the likes of Eddie Hearn won't call out, or will try and completely pivot away from, or completely give you an opposite answer to what you're asking as a question. And the same with other promoters as well. The big old school promoters, the ones that have been around for some time, they do that a lot. And I think what was fresh and nice about seeing Ben Shalom this year was that he called things out, he made fights that maybe we weren't necessarily expecting to see. And if you think about all these fights that have happened this year and some of the smaller hall fights and some of the smaller hall names that have happened this year, I think he's certainly helped bring a lot of these fighters on and give them that TV exposure as well. So that's my justification for saying him over anyone else this year. Again, people will look at it and go, Ben Shalom, why would you pick him? Well, he's my pick for the year. I just feel like he's done a lot for the sport this year, and maybe you don't like the quality of some of his cards, and they're not all great, but then Eddie Hearn's great, as Frank Warren's been great, as Bob Arum's been great. Not that many of them. You can maybe pick one, maybe two out of a year out of how many cards they've done. But I think the fact that Ben Shalom's put on some really good fights this year, some really good headline fights this year, I think is what's done it for me. So yeah, I'm going Ben Shalom this year.
Yeah, I can't really disagree. I think he would be the next in line. I just feel that with PBC, I don't know, I like the way they've done things this year. I know they sort of do keep things internally, and sometimes I moan about that, but I did enjoy their shows more than most. But I mean, discrediting Matchroom, but I mean, I think it's been a bad year for him because of the Canelo defeat, although that was on obviously the zone. And you look at some of, Golovkin, he got the Golovkin Canelo fight. The third fight was a bit of a letdown, wasn't it? Roman Gonzalez and Estrada, another good fight in the zone. But do you know what annoys me is that Estrada always gets the benefit of the doubt. So that frustrated me. So that's why he sort of dropped down. So I can understand why Ben would have overtaken him for you. Absolutely with Boxer, sort of with Sky. I think they've really flexed their muscles this year with some of the cards. As you say, some of those fights that we really wanted to see that we didn't get to see, we finally got because of him. So you can't knock that. I mean, I just think with PBC, I think it's been great. But I mean, saying that, I mean, top ranker in, they've got some great fighters. I mean, he's got Baturviev coming up against Yard, which is going to be a crossover fight, isn't it, between BT and top rank. So, even with all that, you can't even knock top rank. Anue on their show, Stevenson, Shakur, and obviously Lemonchenko as well. So he's got some big fights coming up because you got the Haney Lemonchenko fight. How that's going to work, I'm not quite sure. But I think in terms of the fighters they've got and the shows they've produced, I think the PBC edges it. But I'm 100% with you. I think Ben is a very close second, and of course, I hate to say it, but top rank too, because I'm not the biggest Bob Arum fan.
Well, again, this is our opinion, so you can feel free to say that's his bullshit or you don't like what we're saying. That's your choice. If you've got a good justification for why Eddie Hearn's promoter of the year, then absolutely say it. If you've got a reason why Frank Warren should be promoter of the year, then obviously say it and tweet us or drop a comment in the YouTube box below as you're listening to it. Please do, because I'm interested to hear how people have perceived different promotional companies this year and how they've perceived some of the fight cards. Again, I'm not justifying some of them. Some of them are shockingly crap, but some of them have been quality, even if you've only got that one fantastic fight that you've wanted to see all year. For me, I just think of the standout moments, and I think of them, and I think of the standout fights that essentially, I didn't maybe necessarily want to see Canberra, but the fact that it was delivered to me, I watched it, so it was there for me. Shields Marshall, I wanted to see it, absolutely got made, fantastic. Nobody else has been able to make it, so fair play to him for doing that as well. And Taylor Catterall, a controversial fight, turned out to be way different than what people expected it to be. Eubank Williams as well, earlier on in the year. So there's some tasty fights that happened on his show, so that's kind of why I've stuck with him. So we'll move on to the next one, Trainer of the Year. Who is the Trainer of the Year this year for us? Or for you, or for me, Johnston. We've certainly not gone into this with any predetermined thoughts, that's for sure. We're doing this pretty raw and sort of making a list of the ones we favour and sort of giving you guys our opinions on air. So the ones we've put on the list this year is Derek James, Shane McGuigan, Colin Nathan, Ishmael Salas. So the reasons we put these guys on the list, so first of all, Derek James, he's navigated victories this year for Jamel Charlo, Errol Spence and Frank Martin. Shane McGuigan has helped Lawrence Okolie to another world title defence, turning Chris Billum-Smith into a world title contender, and saved Daniel Dubois from the clutches of defeat, plus continuing to push the likes of Adam Azim very nicely along. Then you've got Colin Nathan, who took two light flyweights in Heki Budler and Sivan Notzinger over to Mexico and defeated Elwin Sota and Hector Flores, respectively. And then Ishmael Salas has directed Joe Joyce to victory against Joseph Parker and made improvements to Kosai Tanaka and assisted Kazuta Ioka to victory over Donny Nietes this year. So they are the four main ones that we have selected this year. Again, subjective. You've probably got your own. You're probably saying, what about this trainer? What about that trainer? We're not putting boxer size Ben on this list this year. He's certainly not one that's featured in our thoughts this year. But ultimately, Johnston, when you look at the list of the four trainers we've put there this year, who stands out the most? Who would you say has had the most significant success as a trainer this year?
I think the first thing I want to say is Eddie Reynoso. I mean, he's had an absolute drop this year. All of his fighters have just fallen by the wayside. So he was obviously our trainer last year, not even a contender this year. I've enjoyed Shane. I think Chen gets a bit of I don't know what it is. People don't like him, I don't think. But the fact he got knocked for the Daniel Dubois situation when he got sort of put down 3 times, I felt that his instructions were good, and I felt that he helped Daniel, because Daniel looked like he was going to walk away, and I think Shane was a good influence and getting Daniel right to go on and win that fight. So for me, I enjoyed that from him. I think Colin Nathan as well with Heki Budler and Notzinger, who two guys that Notzinger obviously being the South African and Budler being the South African as well, both light flyweights, both now in the top 10. At the start of the year, they weren't there, and it was down to Colin Nathan taking those two fighters over to Mexico, beating two guys in their own backyard. Great performance from him. Ishmael Salas as well. I mean, he directed Joe Joyce well through that Joseph Parker fight. I enjoyed. Just the contrast of the size of them two always makes me laugh, and you can see that they have a good relationship, and it shines through on the ring. I believe. I feel that Joyce is very confident with him in there, and it shows with his performance against Parker, and obviously Tanaka and Ioka. Ioka's fighting as well soon, so I think it's New Year's Eve, isn't he? So it'd be interesting to see how he gets on. For me, Derek James. I think everyone's gone with Derek James, and you can't not suggest that his capabilities and his qualities in the corner for big fights, for guys that are top of their game in terms of Charlo and in terms of Spence Jr. I feel like he's done a great job. And then obviously with Frank Martin only recently, that was a real 50-50 fight, and Martin was brilliant in that fight. And a lot of people tip Martin to win it because of Derek James, because he is a tremendous trainer, and he is my trainer of the year.
Well, I'm going to not be on the fence this time, and I'm going to actually side with Derek James also this year, out of the four that we've listed there, just because I feel like he's taken these three in particular names that he's training at the moment, and, I know Errol Spencer's not been as active as we want him to, and same with Jamel Charlo as well, but I think what he's done for them and their careers is he's put a little bit of revitalisation into it, and what he's done is he's actually shown his experiences with his fighters in the corner, and the way he's been able to give good advice in the corner, I think is so important. Like, people knock certain trainers for being cheerleaders in the corner rather than actually giving them technical instructions, and I think that was something that we've looked upon before with other trainers, and I think this is what Boxer Size Ben gets a lot of shit for, is the fact that he doesn't give these technical instructions that he needs to be giving when these fights are happening, or he's not sort of interpreting how the fights are playing out. That's what people slag him for, not us in particular, but people in general who look at him and say these things. I think Derek James, for me, out of the four, has certainly got a list for the year of great names on his resume that he's really done well with. If I was going to look at anybody else on that list, I think maybe I'd look at Ishmael Salas and then maybe Shane McGuigan, but Derek James, for me this year, he's the trainer I've looked at across the world and thought, who's the sort of the dark horse, who's not the stereotypical typecast trainer to look at and say he's the trainer of the year. And I think Derek James, a few people have gone down the same route as us and said Derek James should be the trainer of the year. And I agree. I think he should. And I think for me, he does sort of put my stamp on trainer of the year, and I'm happy. I think he'll have another good year next year. I think he's obviously got some big fights coming up. We've got obviously the Tim Tszyu fight coming up for Charlo early next year as well. Errol Spence will be looking to get a huge fight next year. Frank Martin's just come off the back of a really great fight, and I think he'll be moving forward next year for potential world title honours. So I think next year, he could be in with a shout for trainer of the year next year. But of course, when we do our boxing wish list 2023, we'll certainly break that down and assess like who we think are going to be the trainers, potential fighters, etc. of the year. So let's move on then, Johnston. Let's move on to a juicy one of the year, a juicy category for this year, knockout of the year. This is the one that I think people really enjoy talking about and looking at the highlight reel KOs of what we've seen this year, and I'm going to let you talk us through all of the major knockouts, the highlight reel KOs this year, and ultimately which one of them is your favourite for 2022.
Oh wow, okay, so I'll roll from then. So Joe Cordina with his impressive knockout of Kenichi Ogawa, stunning one punch knockout. It was a beautiful shot from the Welshman. Christian and Billy knocking out Najib Mohammedi in the 5th round, which was another seriously stunning knockout. If you haven't seen that, go and have a look at that. Joe Joyce getting rid of Joe Parker in the 11th, another impressive stoppage. Lee Wood, Michael Conlon, what a fight that was, knocking him out in the 12th and final round. Caleb Plant with an absolute beauty against Anthony Durrell in the 9th round, and obviously controversially dug his grave after. Tyson Fury knocking out Dillian White in the 6th with that stunning uppercut, sort of pushed him on the way down. But makes that a little less impressive for me. But Deontay Wilder, Robert Helenius brutally knocked him out. And Gervonta Davis knocking out Rolly Romero mainly because I'm not a fan of Romero, and it was quite nice to see him get put on his ass.
So out of them then, Johnston, which one of them ultimately is your favourite knockout of this year?
Oh, goodness me. I really, if we're talking one punch, I'm saying Cordina for me. I think Cordina's my knockout of the year for one punch knockout. I do believe that was just come out of nowhere. And Ogal was a decent fight. It's not like he was a nobody. This guy was a decent operator. But in terms of all the drama and how the fight went and how it was all going, I think Lee Woods over Michael Conlan.
It's a tough one, isn't it? This because like, do you go off like just the one punch KO? Do you just go off the that element of it because of the surprise, or do you go off the drama of it? And it's hard not to love the drama of a fight and how it can turn from one end to another. And you think of fights like Corrales Castillo, and that very much like you think of Lee Wood, Michael Conlan, like the way the fight was going. I think you just nailed it on the head. The way that fight was going, you just see Lee Wood's on the verge of losing that title, and to come back and stunningly knock Michael Conlan, not just knock him out, but he knocked him out of the ring, man. He literally knocked the guy out of the ring onto the floor, and it's like, wow, like you don't get to see them moments in the sport that often, and obviously it's concerning. It can be dangerous at times. You don't want the opponents to hit the heads on the floor and get any sort of long-lasting injuries as a result. But in that moment, in the heat of the moment, when you're watching that as a fan, to see that happen when the fight is just going one way or another, and you think, oh my god, what has just happened? You know, it's the sort of moment where you jump out of your seat and you're like, wow. And that is what I love in the sport. We love knockouts, but I love drama, and I think that level of drama in a fight is what makes me love boxing. And just when you think boxing's absolutely crapping on you, you get a fight like that and it just pulls you back in again. A moment like that and it just pulls you back in again. I look at the other ones on the list and I think like Gervonta Davis is definitely a standout for me. Rolly Romero, when he was sort of draped over the ropes like Martin Lawrence in that film, like there was a meme of Rolly Romero and Martin Lawrence going around, and it was absolutely funny, and it was it was hilarious to see. But ultimately, when I look around at the other knockouts and I think, you know, what really stands out the most to me, it's got to be Lee Wood, Michael Conlan. Like Joe Cordina, again, I side with you when you say, you know, just for the sheer fact that it was a one punch out of nowhere knockout. Not expected, by the way, from Cordina, because it's not the sort of thing he's done in his career before. It certainly stands out a mile off when he knocks a fighter out like that in that fashion. But just for the sheer drama of it and the way the fight was and the way it was in that final round, it's got to be Lee Wood for me. He has to take knockout of the year. It was an amazing, amazing fight, and certainly one of those fights that we'll be talking about again in a little while when we talk about fight of the year. So, shall we move on? Next one, upset of the year. Upset of the year. I love this one as well. Like, what do you define as an upset of the year? Like, how big is a fighter got to be for it to be classed as an upset of the year? So, what we've done is we've listed 5 fights this year which we consider to be upsets of the year, and I'm going to list them off, Johnston, and I'm going to let you jump in and just sort of talk about the ones that sort of stand out of that list to you. So we've got Jaio Pataya taking that wide points decision against Myris Bradis, Martin Bicole bashing up Tony Yoka, Nina Hughes quite recently schooling Jamie Mitchell, Luis Alberto Lopez taking that decision against Josh Warrington only a couple of weeks ago, and then finally Dmitry Bivol beating Canelo in Vegas in a fight in which many people thought Canelo would go again to light heavyweight and be victorious, and it wasn't to be that night for him. So, you know, there's a few good fights on there that we've seen this year that you can consider to be upsets of the year, but which one out of them actually does it for you?
Jaio Pataya was an interesting one because I sort of felt that he had, from the footage I'd seen of him, he had some decent boxing skills, and I just thought that Marius Bridis would eventually get to him. So that was a really impressive victory, and one that sort of did come out of, if you're going to side, you're always going to side with Bridis. I had it like about 60-40 because of where the fight was, maybe even 75, sort of 35 to 25, sorry, to Bridis. But the way it went, I mean, Jaio Pataya, I think that was a great victory for him. Like Nina Hughes, you know, the old, I say old, I don't mean to be disrespectful to Nina, but she's, you know, she's an older lady. She's come back sort of from the amateur. She had a great amateur career, and she decided, you know what, I'm going to go pro, and look what she's gone and done. She's gone and won gone and beat Jamie Mitchell. It's so impressive. Bivol against Canelo again. We felt there was even times where I felt that Bivol could win that fight. I just sort of sided with Canelo as well because of the fact it was in Vegas. Warrington and Lopez, again, we mentioned this is a banana skin. It was just nice to see that England not producing any dodgy cards. So for me, Sean, look, I'm going to say Martin Bakole bashing up Tony Yoka was a joy to watch. Literally because, again, I don't think many felt that Bakole was going to win that. Those that came out and said that he was going to do it was just sort of by chance, I felt. I didn't feel that Tony Yoka was going to get beat by Bakole. Not that Tony Yoka had ever really convinced me as such, but it was more to do with the fact that just the way Bakole went about his business. And how he almost, even then, he still almost got robbed from the fight as well, didn't he? Was it a majority decision, I believe in? And I haven't got it in front of me. But yeah, for me, I enjoyed watching that fight. It was nice to see Bakole going over there to France and doing a number on Tony Yoka. And he's put himself forward now for a contender I mean, British Fighter of the Year for sure, although he's not from Britain. He's obviously resided in Scotland, but he's British to us. He's British at heart, really. But look, he has produced, I think, one of the upsets of the year.
Well, it's easy just to say Bivol beating Canelo's an upset of the year, but I don't want to go with that because I don't think it was as one-sided going into the fight as what people maybe think it was. It wasn't. I mean, Bivol, we knew what Bivol was all about. It was all really about like whether Canelo could step up to that level again at light heavyweight and actually be victorious. And ultimately, you kind of get swayed by, you know, how he has previously done and how he's been able to sort of move through the weight so comfortably. And then Bivol just shown as his ability, he's always been there, and he negated the smaller man and he made it so much easier for himself. And then you obviously look at his other fight against Ramirez this year, and he's just continued that trend, hasn't he? So for me, it wasn't really an upset because it was always there with Bivol. It was an upset in the sense that obviously Canelo was the global superstar. Bivol really wasn't. And in the sense that they've been able to then transcend Bivol as a result of that victory, he's just better for him in the long term now that people are actually getting to see him for what he really is. But if I'm looking at actual upsets of the year, I've got to look at two in particular. I've got to look at Jai Opetaia, Myris Bradis, because Opetaia was the unknown quantity going into that fight. You know, he'd not fought anybody before he fought Myris Bradis. Like, let's be honest, he'd not fought anybody at that level before he'd fought Bradis, and he went on in a really, really good fight, by the way, against Bradis. We really enjoyed that fight. He got a broken jaw, Jai Opetaia, as well, and he came through that broken jaw to still take a decision over Myris Bradis. And then you get Nina Hughes, 40-year-old, coming to boxing, been in boxing as a pro boxer for 12 months, had 5 professional fights, goes in there and beats Jamie Mitchell in 5 professional fights. Yes, she's got that amateur career. Yes, she's been away for a little bit, but she's come back. I think that takes some doing for somebody to be out of the ring and then turn pro at such a late stage and win a world title in 5 fights. I think that takes some doing for me. So, you know, it's a hard one, but I think I'll have to go with Nina Hughes this year. I think she deserves that mantelpiece for doing what she's done. I mean, how do you go away from the sport for a period of time like that, having not gone pro before, and then turn pro, and then within 5 fights you're a world champion? People could easily pick this apart and say, well, it's because of the lack of depth within female boxing. But I don't care what you say. For someone to do it at an age she's at 40 years old, when essentially, as an athlete, are you in your prime anymore? Are you at your prime? People can argue these points and say what they want to say about it, but my opinion is that she deserves that mantelpiece of an upset of the year because she's done what maybe no one could have expected her to do. Jai Opetaia beating Myris Bradis comes a close second for me. Bivol, Canelo, easiest one to pick out of there, and I'm not going to do it because I just think it was a lot closer than what people thought it was going to be. So yeah, Nina Hughes for me. She schooling Jamie Mitchell, I think, was a really good highlight and a good upset this year for female boxing in particular, and boxing in general in terms of upsets. So that is mine. You've gone for Bakole over Yoka. I've gone for Hughes over Mitchell. Going against the grain, that's what we like to do here, not going with the stereotypical typecast fights. And it leads us nicely, sticking with the theme of female fighters in this sport. We're going to go for the best fight of the year in women's boxing. I think there's only 2 Johnston here that I think stand out a mile, that stand out an absolute mile from the rest. And that, of course, is Clarissa Shields backing up her words by outclassing Savannah Marshall and Katie Taylor taking a decision against Amanda Serrano after almost getting stopped on her feet. They're the two biggest fights in boxing this year. In terms of females being in the ring, they are the two most notable, the biggest fights of the year. Which one of them really would, for you, take that mantelpiece of female fight of the year?
Yeah, it's a funny one, this, because it is almost like an event of the year rather than probably the female event of the year and a fight of the year. For me, I don't think there was, when we've seen other fights before, and these fights weren't in particular that a close. I say they don't. I don't think either of them were really that close. But saying that, well, Clarissa certainly wasn't. People may argue with the Serrano Taylor fight, but I think the one thing with it is that, because of the scale of them. I mean, you could even add Michaela Meyer and Baumgardner as well, because that obviously was added on to the card as well. And that was a good fight on the Clarissa Shields and Marshall sort of undercard co-main event, wasn't it? Those three fights in particular were huge fights for women's boxing. But for me, in terms, again, I mean, I'm going to go with the drama of it. First of all, absolute respect to Clarissa Shields. She raved and shattered her mouth off, and she backed up her words and outclassed Savannah Marshall. I don't think there's anyone that could even mention or even fail to see that Clarissa Shields is a real talent. She produced her goods against Marshall. But in terms, again, of the drama, Katie Taylor would look like she was in pretty much control of the fight, and then seeing Serrano really hurt her, and she's looking like it's going to get stopped, and then she manages to regroup and come back to then take the fight to the 10th round and eventually, I mean, turn it back in her favour. In terms of its drama, I think that gets the female fight of the year. I mean, I don't think there's anything that really comes close, because of the magnitude of the fight and because of that moment sort of in the middle rounds. It's just pure drama, wasn't it? It was great for women's boxing. Two of the best fighters in the world fighting against each other, and you got to remember, Amanda Serrano's moved down a weight and gone on. I think she's unified. I think she's unified, not undisputed. I don't know, but she's a featherweight, and she's gone and done that after the Taylor fight. So, just two. I don't know what else to say, really. It was just a great fight for the year. We were breaking it to male and female, but let's be honest. It could be up there for fight of the year in general across the genders, couldn't it?
It quite easily could be. And earlier in the year, I did an interview with Christy Martin, and she came on the show and was talking about her book that she'd released and a little bit of information on her. And, we talked about women's boxing, and in that episode, we talked in particular about that particular fight. And she spoke to both of them ladies going into that fight. And, she was one of the pioneers of women's boxing in the 90s, being on, the undercard of Frank Bruno, Mike Tyson, their second bout. You watch her story, you watch her documentary, and you can see how much of a struggle it was then for women in boxing. The fact that Amanda Serrano, Katie Taylor have been able to do what they've done this year is unbelievable. MSG, such a huge iconic boxing event, and how many times do we do all our historical content, and MSG comes up so much in that of being the mecca of boxing, and these two ladies sold it out completely and had everybody on the feet at the end of the fight because it was that dramatic and such a close competitive fight. Now, I'm not taking anything away from Shields and Marshall or Meyer and Baumgardner. I thought their fights equally were very highly competitive, very exciting fights, and certainly did a lot to the world of boxing, and certainly made people stand up and go, the quality of this sport is just getting better and better and better. But the fact that Taylor and Serrano was just a complete event, as opposed to, like you said, it wasn't just a fight, it was a whole event. It was a fight weekend. It was the sort of thing like I dream of going to sort of Vegas for, like a big fight weekend in Vegas. Although I know this was at MSG, even going to MSG to watch a fight would be an absolute dream of mine to do. So for them to put on such an event that was packed to the rafters and everybody on the feet and everybody on social media talking about it, even people outside of the sport talking about it, that did what it needed to do for the sport of boxing this year. And that's, for me, is why it does go down as the female fight of the year. And again, I'm not taking anything away from the other fights that we've mentioned, because the quality of them was just as good. I just think because of the whole event of Taylor Serrano, it just had to be the fight of the year for me, for the females. So absolutely stands out, number one. Brilliant fight. A rewatchable fight, that's for sure. So Taylor Serrano, we both go for Taylor Serrano on this one, understandably, for the reasons that we've set out. But the next category, of course, is then the male fighter of the year, and obviously there was a couple of more added to this list in terms of fighters that have been involved in some highly competitive bouts. But Johnston, I'm going to let you run through these fights and present them to the audience listening, and then obviously decide which one for you stands out a mile off.
Yeah, so male fight of the year. Again, I mean, we've already mentioned it, but Lee Wood knocking out Michael Conlan in the 12th and final round, where, as you mentioned, Sean, behind on all three of those scorecards at the time as well, literally knocking him out of the ring. Sebastian Fundora stops Erickson Rubin in the 9th after putting him down in the 2nd and getting dropped himself in the 7th. One of my fun, it's just a great fun fight to watch, and Fundora we're huge fans of as well. So Jamel Charlo stopping Brian Carlos Castano in 10 rounds. Joe Joyce knocking out Joe Parker in the 11th. And after being dropped in the 2nd round, this one not many people have mentioned, is Troy Williamson recovering to take a unanimous but very controversial decision. I mean, he deserved to take it against Reece Cartwright, but for me, it was a lot closer than the scorecard suggests. And then a thoroughly entertaining fight between Ken Shiro and Kayaguchi that ended with a 7th round stoppage for Ken Shiro. I did not see that coming. I thought Ken Shiro, if he was going to take it on points. And I may add as well, that 5th round was absolutely polished. It was beautiful to watch. So yeah, Kinsaro, Kayaguchi, Williamson, Cartwright, Joyce, Parker, Charlo, Castano, Fundora, Rubin, Wood, Conlan.
So let's go.
I'll let you jump on first.
I know.
I was gonna, but go on. Let me have a little think.
It's a tough one, isn't it? This is certainly a tough category to be sitting back and going through. And again, you can just easily sit there and go with one particular fight and go, what was the fight of the year for you? There's all of them on that list, I think, are very justifiable in terms of the fights that I think, and I agree, are certainly up there at the top of my list. I mean, like I say, we do not put every single fight on there because there are more fights, because we'll be here all day, and I don't think you guys would want to be listening to like us listing off 20 fights, because there are easily 20 fights this year that could certainly be in with a shout. So what we've had to do is try and filter it down and give our own opinions of what we liked this year and why we're giving them our awards from the BTR Boxing Podcast Network. So I looked at it, and I looked at this list earlier on before recording the episode, and I thought, really, what stood out to me this year? What was shocking? What was dramatic? What, give me the sort of moments in boxing that I love to see? And again, it all points back to Lee Wood and Michael Conlan. And I just feel like it's the type of fight that gets you inducted into the Hall of Fame. These are the type of fights on people's resumes that get you inducted into the Hall of Fame. And I'm not suggesting Lee Wood is going to be a Hall of Fame candidate in the future. I'm not so sure personally. He'd have to do a lot more than what he's done in boxing to be able to get there. But it's those type of fights that certainly sit within that category. The fights that we loved covering for Legendary Nights, all them huge mega fights, Gatti Ward, Corrales, Castillo. We've talked about all these fights in our Legendary Nights series, but Lee Wood, Michael Conlan give us so much drama. Like, Michael Conlan, purely the better boxer on the night, and he's just boxing his way to a victory. Michael Conlan looks like he's going to become the world champion that night. For Lee Wood to have the persistence and the ability to be able to come back and knock him out so dramatically in the 12th round, I can't look any other way than that fight, Johnston. I can't look at any other fight and go, what really had me on the edge of my seat throughout the course of it. And it was that one that did. I look, Sebastian Fundora, Erickson Lubin, yes, absolutely, that was a dramatic fight because we'd not seen Fundora in trouble before like he was in this fight. Charlo Castano, a brilliant fight, but we'd already seen it once, so we kind of knew what we were going to get there. Joe Joyce and Joe Parker, yeah, I think again, little bit expected maybe. I just don't think Wood versus Conlan was an expected fight, and for that and the reasons that I've set out, I think for me that is the male fight of this year.
It's difficult, isn't it? I mean, just one thing I will say, not Shinga and Flores as well. If anyone ain't seen that, go and have a look at that fight, because that's another one that could have quite easily made this list. Didn't, unfortunately, not for us. Mate. I mean, Kenshiro and Kawaguchi was a fight I was really looking forward to. The fifth round was brilliant. I mean, it sort of defined the fight, but I can't help but disagree with Sean. I mean, I just can't. I mean, Lee Wood gets knocked down and against a guy like Michael Conlan, who, to be fair, we don't necessarily consider to be a big puncher, but he lands an absolute belter on Wood, and Wood looks absolutely out of it. It looks like Conlan's going to stop him early. And then Collins just boxing masterfully, and Lee Wood's gradually just grinding his way into the fight. And then right towards the end, he hurts him, knows he hurts him, comes out for that final round and does the business, knocking him out of the ring. We had the massive scare as well. Was Colin all right because he's fallen out? And, I mean, the drama of that fight was brilliant. It's a great fight. You know, the knockdown, the finish, and then the aftermath. I hope they get a look. I mean, if they get it on again, you do wonder if we're going to see the same fireworks. But I don't think you can look beyond Wood Conlan. So that I'm agreeing with you, Sean. That's my fight of the year.
Well, let's move on then to British Female Fighter of the Year. The candidates for this were Terry Harper, Ellie Scottney, Nina Hughes, Natasha Jonas. So Terry Harper this year is now the IBO WBA Super Welterweight champion and obviously has recovered well since that stunning knockout loss to Alicia Baumgardner last year, taking 2 decisions against Yamila Abelaneda and taking the world titles from Hannah Rankin. So she's gone from losing titles to then becoming a champion in a higher weight category and setting herself in line for a huge unification matchup as well. Ellie Scottney became the new super bantamweight European champion when she beat Mary Romero, but before that she defeated Maria Roman and Yorgelina Guanini. She's had a brilliant year as a prospect, someone who's had not too many fights and looked really troubled in some of them fights at times. Nina Hughes, we've already mentioned what she's done this year, ultimately trumping out there as one of the upsets of the year for many people, including myself. Natasha Jonas, the unified super welterweight champion, continues to improve like a fine wine with 3 wins this year. First collecting the WBO title from Chris Namus, then the WBC from Patricia Bergholt, and then the IBF from Maria Eve Decaire quite recently. I think this is a pretty straightforward one for me, Johnston. I've already made my feelings clear on social media previously, so I can't go back on my word about who I think is the best female fighter to come from these shows this year. It's got to be Jonas. Natasha Jonas this year has done what maybe people thought she wasn't able to do, which was to go on to become a world champion. Not only that, but for her to then collect another 2 major belts in the division. I think you need to give her so much respect and put so much respect on her name. And she's such a humble human being as well about the whole thing. She needs that trumpet blowing, man. People need to blow her trumpet. When she lost that fight against Vivian Obanov, I thought she might have been finished. I thought she'd never get to that echelon of becoming a world champion and fulfilling that potential. And then obviously she fights Terry Harper and has a really close fight with her. Then Katie Taylor, and you just feel at that point that she's good, she's world class, but I just don't think she's going to do it. And it made me feel that way as a fan. But then to see her make them adaptations in camp and come into these fights and get these victories and become a champion in 3 different organisations, I think is an unbelievable feat in a year. And remembering that, age ain't nothing but a number sometimes, and she's certainly shown that this year. And I think a unification fight with Terry Harper would be the ultimate dream for next year. But I think she's got her sights set on some bigger marquee fights for next year. But for me, Johnston, Natasha Jonas wins this, hands down, best female British fighter of this year.
I'm going to agree with you, but I will say that Terry Harper did push her far, because you got to remember from the back end of last year, Terry Harper gets devastatingly knocked out by Alicia Baumgardner. We're giving Alicia the knockout of the year last year on behalf of that, well, one of them anyway, and Terry looked like in trouble, really. You just wondered if she could recover from that. And for her to then recover and then go and beat, get 2 decision victories against, and then especially Hannah Rankin. I mean, that is a dramatic rise for Terry from where she's come to this point now. But I can't help but agree with you, because Natasha was a very similar situation. You think of the fight she's had with Katie Taylor, and a lot of people felt that she won that fight. To then be able to regroup, recover, and then this year she never had no titles at the start of the year, but she's got 3. The opposition can probably be questioned, but I think for me, I know she would like to go on to other things. I would love to see the Harper and Jonas fight, and I believe that would be an undisputed, would it not? 'Cause she's got 3 titles, Natasha, and Terry's got
It would be.
2.
Yeah, it would
So I
be.
mean, that has got to be the route. Harper, Jonas. I mean, we're talking how the big events for female boxing, and what we've got, and what we had this year. Jonas and Harper could make themselves a nice bit of money. It could be a big event. They could even headline themselves, and maybe even do another female card with that on it, and then maybe press for one of the rematches from one of the other cards again, from what we had this year. But yeah, Natasha Jonas, though, to be fair, is my British female fighter of the year as well. But Terry does come a close second because of where she come from at the start of the year. Two girls really deserve of a great mention. Obviously, Ellie Nina as well, brilliant. But yeah, Natasha for me too, Sean.
So let's move on to the British Male Fighter of the Year then. Now, in this category, we've actually included Tyson Fury. Now, we've got global categories for female and male fighters of the year, which we are going to come on to. I think the reason we've put him in this category as the sort of British Fighter of the Year is because I think we both agree I don't think he's done enough to sit in that list of global male fighter of the year, because when we go through this list in not too distant future, we're going to talk about some other fighters and you'll think, yeah, absolutely, what they've done this year certainly trump sort of what Tyson Fury's done. Maybe we could have put him in that, but what he's done this year is he's defended his WBC heavyweight title twice, once against Dillian White in April, then obviously against Derek Chisora not too long ago at the start of this month. For me, it wasn't, arguably it wasn't enough for what we wanted for a guy in his position. A guy in his position should be fighting Usyk, should be fighting Joshua at this point of his career. They were the fights we wanted to see. We didn't get them. We got White, who, okay, yeah, arguably that was a fight maybe he needed to get out of the way. But Derek Chisora was a really poor choice of opponent, and we've made no qualms about what we feel about that. So to sit him in there with the likes of Inoue and Bivol and Stevenson and Haney and Charlo and Usyk himself, I don't think he's sort of deserving of that mantelpiece just because of the sheer lack of quality in the fights. Not discrediting White, because I think White was a good fighter I did want to see, but Chisora was a poor choice of opponent, and that puts me off, and that's why I've stuck him there, and I think that's why we both agree he sits there. So Tyson Fury's in there, Sonny Edwards, Nick Ball, Fabio Wardley, Joe Joyce, Lee Wood, Martin Bakole. Now, we've talked a lot about most of these fighters on this list already, but just heading to the ones we've not added any context to this year. So Fabio Wardley this year has only fought 7 rounds, knocking out 3, Daniel Marks, Chris Healy, and the most impressive victory was against Nathan Gorman quite recently. Sonny Edwards, we had this year, IBF champion, took 2 decisions against Mohamed Wasim, but the most impressive came against Felix Alvarado. Then Nick Ball, the little featherweight, picked up 3 wins this year over Isaac Lowe, Nathaniel Calocco, and Jesus Rubio. They were the 3 victories for him this year. So, looking at all the fighters on this list, if you want to look at which British fighter has been the most impressive of the year, which one? Which one for you does it? Bearing in mind, we've not mentioned like Joe Joyce's, victories over Christian Hammer, Joseph Parker, Lee Wood's victories, then defending against Michael Conlon, and then of course the notable victory for Martin Bakole over Tony Yoka. So out of all them sort of resumes of fights this year, which one of them would be your British fighter of the year?
There's not really anyone that's really stuck out for me in particular. I mean, Tyson Fury was an impressive victory against White. So for me, that puts him in a quite high regard, but then he sort of goes back down and again by fighting Derek Chisora. I think Sonny Edwards has moved up by fighting Alvarado, a dangerous fighter, and he produced the goods. He's a stunning fighter, Sonny Edwards. He really is, and he proved that against Alvarado. And I tell you what, this guy, I can't help but think he's just got all of it there, mate. I really do. I didn't think of it at one point. I thought it was just a mouth for little shit, to be honest. But he's actually, every time I see him, he just impresses me. Nick Ball, I love watching Nick Ball. Great performance from him. Fabio Wardley, Joe Joyce. I mean, Wardley, his big one's Gorman, absolutely just demolishing him. Joe Joyce as well, great performance against Parker. Lee Wood, 2 decent victories, really good victories, and Bakole, 1 big one. I don't know. I suppose you've got to look at the quality of opposition. So, in that regard, I suppose Joyce has beaten Parker, and I believe Parker and White, there wasn't much between them two. Fury beating White's a good one. So I suppose I'd edge towards Joyce in that performance because he stopped Parker, something no one ever done. And then Lee Wood, I mean, can't go Lee Wood again, can we? I mean, do you know what? It's a throw up.
Yeah, of course you can.
It. I mean, it's a throw up between Lee Wood. I mean, he's got knockout of the year. He's got fight of the year. Lee Wood and Joe Joyce. I'm going to go Lee Wood. I think Lee Wood's the best British male fighter of the year.
I've already made my decision, Johnston. I've already gone Lee Wood. I've already gone Lee Wood, and I'll tell you again, it feels like the Lee Wood show. And obviously, when we're putting these clips out on social media, when we do the audiograms, this is a message to you, Lee Wood. You have won 3 awards on the PTR Boxing Podcast Network, and I mean, I'm telling you now, like what he's achieved this year. Like, on a serious note, what he's achieved this year is something that if you would have gone back to the start of this year and gone...
You wouldn't have thought it.
No, exactly. You took the words right out of my mouth.
Sorry, I had to, but it's true.
It's one of the... For me, it's a fighter that, if you look back on his career, you look at the losses on his record and you think... You know, he wasn't going to get to that level where he was going to become a world champion and then go on to defend it in such dramatic fashion. Like, nobody could have foresaw what was going to go on. And I think the fact that what he's done, because he beat Kanzu and then he goes on to defend it against Michael Conlan in such emphatic fashion. I think, you know, if you look at, like, what he's achieved in that time, I think for me, personally, you know, you have to consider where someone comes from at the start of the year to where they are at the end of the year. And has Tyson Fury progressed any further on than last year? I don't think so. I don't think he has, by knocking out White and beating Chisora. Has Sonny Edwards? Not so much. I think I'm not discrediting him, but I think when he gets a huge fight, maybe Julio Cesar Martinez, if he would have beat him this year and had that fight, then maybe we would be in for a shout with a different conversation. Nick Ball just needs a big name now. Once Nick Ball gets a huge name, that is it. Once he's got that on his resume, for me, that's when I can start considering him. Fabio Wardley, I think Daniel Martz and Chris Healy are not the greatest of opponents in the world, but he's still learning. But the fact that he beat Nathan Gorman, I think, was a huge win for him. So, you know, you can say he's definitely had an improved year. Joe Joyce, the first man to stop Joseph Parker, definitely is up there with a shout. Martin Bicole over Tony Yoka, yeah, I can understand that. But a guy who seemingly wasn't expected to get to world level and become a world champion, becomes a world champion, and then defends it against the natural, pure-born boxer who was winning the fight and ultimately on the verge of winning this fight and was stopped emphatically. How can you not give it to somebody who does that in the space of 12 months? You can't not do that. Like you said, the level of opposition, the accolades at the end of it all. So I'm going to go with Lee Wood. I'm going to go with Lee Wood as the British Male Fighter of the Year. And you can call me out if you want on that, and you can say other people deserve it. But for me, it has to be Lee Wood. I think what he's done this year, knockout of the year, fighter, British Male Fighter of the Year, fight of the year. Do you know, it is one of them fights that will be remembered for a long time. And when you think about the names on this list that we've put on there, will we really remember all them other fights on that list out of this year? Because I don't think we will. And that's my argument right there. Is like, will you remember all them other fights this year? I don't think people will talk about 2022 and go, that was the year Tyson Fury beat Dillian White and Derek Chisora. No, people will look at it and go, that was the year that Lee Wood had that emphatic fight with Michael Conlan, stopped him and you know, made a little bit of his own history, really, and created his own destiny.
I mean, to be fair, he could now move on to the next list. I suppose I'll jump on to the next one because, I mean, with Lee Wood, you know, a great year for him. And I think we've made our point that he does, in terms of the opposition. I mean, people may discredit Kanzu, but even the way he dealt with that fight, and that was a good fight too. So, yeah, Lee Wood. And he could move into the next one maybe next year. And that would be the global, obviously not the next one because he's a male, he's not a female. But we're going to move into the global female fighter of the year now. So moving from British. So this is the world, international, whatever you want to call it. So I'll just run through the list quickly, Sean. So we've got Katie Taylor, the undisputed lightweight champion, who got wins over Amanda Serrano and Karen Carvajal. You want to pronounce it. Clarissa Shields, the undisputed middleweight champion, took victories over Emma Cousin and Savannah Marshall. Chantel Cameron, the undisputed super lightweight champion, took wins over Victoria Bustos and became the queen of the division with a notable win over Jessica McCaskill in the division above as well. Alicia Baumgardner, the unified super featherweight champion, took a very contentious split decision against Michaela Mayer, recording her second win of the year. Her first win was a decision over Edith Matisse.
So if I'm talking about female fighter of the year, I'm looking at, again, what people have achieved in this year. And I look at the names on the list and I think, you know, who's achieved quite a lot this year, who's impressed me the most this year. I think when you've got Taylor and Shields at that level, right, I don't like being sort of typecast, and I don't like just going with them names straight away, because automatically you'll just go, yeah, Taylor Shields has to be them too. Undisputed lightweight champion, undisputed middleweight champion. You know what she's done. Both of them have been fantastic in the sport this year. But I always look at what people have gone on to achieve throughout the course of a year, and how they've then progressed from where they were at the start of the year. Like I said in the last category, like what of Shields and Marshall, Taylor and Serrano done this year? Well, they've created great events, great fights, but it hasn't told us anything more about them as fighters than what maybe we already knew, which was that they were very, very good fighters that just basically solidified themselves as the greatest at their weights, essentially. But for me, it was Chantel Cameron that I was very impressed with this year. I think her becoming the queen of the division was the most impressive thing for me this year. I think when you look at Chantel Cameron, you look at, the fights that potentially she's being talked about in the future. She's being touted as a potential fight for Katie Taylor, and you look at like what she's done to solidify her claim to get to that point. And I think what you've got to look at here is like what she was able to do. She was able to unify a whole division in this year, and I think that's what stands out to me mostly, really. I know obviously we wanted to see her fight Callie Reese. Callie Reese obviously vacated the titles and she wasn't able to do it in the way she wanted to do it, but Jessica McCaskill, the undisputed welterweight champion, came down to fight her and came down to give her a fight, and it was a legitimate fight for her. Like, you look at like what she's done this year. She's beaten Victoria Noella Bustos. She's defended IBF, WBC titles. Then she's gone on to unify the division this year and give us another unified champion in another division. So you've got Katie Taylor, undisputed lightweight. You've got super lightweight Chantal Cameron. You've got obviously Jessica McCaskill at welterweight now, and you've got middleweight, Clarissa Shields. So it's like they're doing it better than what the men can do it at the moment in terms of unifying divisions and making an undisputed champion in a division. But I could sit here and say Katie Taylor covers Shields easily, but Chantel Cameron does it for me. I think what she's done this year, over the course of sort of last year bleeding into this year, and it's the same, what we failed to mention in the last category was that, the Kanzu fight, automatically you assume he did that this year, he did that last year, but I think in the space of 12 months, the fact that he beat Kanzu and then he went on to beat, obviously, Michael Conlan in that fight, it did it for me. And it's the same with Chantel Cameron. She obviously beat Mary McGee last year in a really tough fight, then comes into this year and then unifies the division completely, becomes undisputed champion. That's why she gets it for me.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's a tough one because of the fact that, as you've mentioned with the other girls, I mean, Katie Taylor, I mean, the fight with Serrano was a great event. It had everything about it, so that was tremendous. And then obviously Clarissa as well doing what she needed to do. I mean, Alicia Bombarada is a definite shout because, I mean, where she came from, she fought Michaela Mayer. I do feel that was a lot tighter. In fact, I felt that Mayer won that fight, to be honest with you. I'll have to watch it again. Some people have suggested that it wasn't a robbery. I don't believe it was a robbery. It was very contentious. So for me, that's why I don't feel that Alicia Bombarada is that much better than Mayer. I think if they had another fight, I think Mayer could win it. But yeah, because of Chantel Cameron's, the thing is, Jessica McCaskill, that wasn't an easy fight. It really wasn't. And, for all the marbles, and she got the performance done. So yeah, I'm with you. I'm agreeing with you. I'm going to say Chantel Cameron for the global female fight of the year.
That's it. Let's move on to the major category of the year. The one that everybody wants to know, who have we got for global male fighter of the year? Who out of all the fighters worldwide has impressed us the most? Let's sit on this list as we make a decision about who is the global male fighter of the year. So, Alexander Usyk, Jamel Charlo, Devin Haney, Shakur Stevenson, Kenshiro Teraji, Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez, Naoya Inoue, and Dimitri Bivol. There are candidates for global male fighter of the year. For me, it was always going to be a toss-up between Dimitri Bivol, Naoya Inoue, and Devin Haney. They were the three names that stood out to me in particular this year. Again, based on what they've been able to achieve in the year. But who's done it for me? Who has impressed me the most? Who has sort of stood out more than anyone? Who's the one that I've walked away from 2022 thinking, do you know what? You've took so much more credit away from this year and put yourself on the map even more than what you was last year. And that man has to be Dimitri Bivol for me. It has to be Bivol. Although his victories are against, obviously, Canelo, who came up a weight to fight him, but the fact that he beat an undefeated fighter in Zurdo Ramirez, Gilberto Ramirez, what he did is he put himself on the map with that victory against Canelo. He put himself on the map in the sense that the sort of more casual audience of boxing don't always follow the likes of someone like Bivol. We've always said, he needs a big fight on his resume. He needs a big win. He needs a name on his resume that people know of. Canelo was that name, and that victory for him has basically shown the world that what we already knew about him is just coming to fruition, which is a brilliant boxer and arguably now the best light heavyweight in the world. Because of his performances this year. Yes, Canelo wasn't a fully fledged light heavyweight, but Zurdo Ramirez, he looks like a bloody cruiserweight. So for me, he was the other guy, apart from Beterbiev in the light heavyweight division, that he needed to etch his name on his resume, and he did that in emphatic fashion. So Bivol for me has to take it. That's my opinion. You could easily put a Nue on there with his destruction of Nonito Donaire in their rematch and his beating of Paul Butler only last week. Or you could easily put Devin Haney on there becoming undisputed lightweight champion and then defending it against George Kambosos twice. Easy to put these guys on that list and swap them around. It's easy to talk about the likes of Shenko Stevenson and Alexander Usyk, who had that one fight this year because of obviously the war in Ukraine. But it has to be Bivol. He started out the year again. He started out this year, as a potential to be the light heavyweight's best in the division. For me, he's ended the year being the light heavyweight best in the division. That's how I've looked at him now. Whereas with the rest of those fighters, I already knew he was the best in that division. It was just a formality, him going on to become undisputed in the division. The same with Haney, really. He needed to become undisputed, and he did it. And I think it was kind of a lot of these outcomes for these fights sometimes are just foregone conclusions. We kind of knew Alexander Usyk would probably have Joshua's number again, and he did. But for Bivol, we didn't know whether he'd ultimately beat Canelo, and we didn't know whether he would go on to beat Ramirez. And I think that's what does it for me. That's why I'm justifying Bivol as my global male fighter of the year.
Yeah, I mean, look, Bivol, the Canelo fight, we didn't feel that Bivol would win that fight. I mean, the Gilberto fight, Ramirez fight, we sort of felt that he would win that fight and he come through. But as you said, there was a huge size difference there. And Ramirez is a name, undefeated. Okay, his resume was definitely padded, but he was a guy that posed a threat, and he nullified it quite literally easily because Bivol is a tremendous boxer, and he proved that against Ramirez after beating Canelo Alvarez as well, who, as you say, did move up a weight. I mean, Inoue, we knew what he was going to do, Sean. It was obvious. He's had a great year. He's undisputed, but against an aging fighter, although we give him a good one in the first fight, I think the second fight was pretty much going to happen, and it was going to go one way, and that's what happened. And Butler, well, we knew Butler did much better than we perceived. Shakur Stevenson, I mean, that was a 50-50 fight with Valdez. It could have gone either way. We favoured Stevenson to prove that he was that superior boxer, and he done that in one tremendous performance. Haney Kambosos Jr., we knew was going to happen. Sean, I'm just echoing the same words as you here. Charlo, that was a closer fight though with Castano. I think a lot of people were sort of some people were edging towards Castano for the rematch, but again, Charlo proved his ability and got rid of him. Usyk, Joshua, to do it again against Joshua just re-solidified Usyk's position in the heavyweight division, and has probably knocked Joshua's confidence completely. I mean, who knows what Joshua we're going to get back. So for me, I think the biggest ones is the Bivol, is Rodriguez, and is Kenshiro as well, because Kenshiro, you got to remember, got knocked out last year against Ibuki. He came back this year to knock Ibuki out in 3 rounds to win the WBC light flyweight title, and then goes on to fight Kayaguchi in a fight that no one thought he was going to knock him out in, and he knocked him out. In terms of the levels there, from knockout to where he is now, that's a successful year. And the same with Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez. You got to think that Rangazar fight, it wasn't even a Rangazar fight. I can't think who it was. It the Gonzalez fight? One of them he took on short notice, come out of nowhere. And I mean, beating Rangazar and Gonzalez, I think they were great performances from Rodriguez. People knew of him, but I think the Rangazar sort of pushed him up and elevated him now into one of the best young fighters in the world. So if I'm probably gonna go with. I'm going to go against you, Sean. I mean, Bivol's had a great year, but he was fighting a smaller guy. Ramirez, I mean, it's hard not to go for Bivol. If Bivol goes and repeats it next year, then he will be my fighter of the year without a doubt. But I'm going to go with Bam Bam Rodriguez, literally because of the fact that at the start of the year, people just tipped him to be, is he going to do what he's going to do? Until do what he done against Rangazar was impressive. So for me, I'm going to give it to Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez.
That's a really good shout, and I actually feel like you've just completely killed my argument off with Bivol now. Not intentionally. I know you. I'm happy you've gone a completely different way, and actually, when you put it like that, you've sold me a little bit on the fact that maybe I've overlooked Rodriguez, going into sort of my decision to make the award to Bivol. However, I stick with my decision. I go with Bivol for the reasons I set out. Yeah, of course it could.
Could have gone either way.
Of course it could. It's subjective. At the end of the day, if we went for the same award and give it to the same person on every single category, then this show wouldn't be worth listening to, would it? It's as simple as that. No, you might as well just post the results on Twitter or Facebook or whatever and just say, this is what we've picked for the year. No point in listening to the episode, which is like an hour and a half long, because all you're going to get is this, in the episode. So I think it's good that we've gone differently on a few of the fights. Some of them, it was really difficult not to go the same on because of how good they were or how big of a moment they were in the sport. So, it's ultimately why we've chose to do this the way we've done it, which is not go in here with predetermined results and actually go in here with, raw reactions to what we feel is our justification for certain awards being given to certain people and fights and fighters and trainers, etc. of the year. So, that is pretty much it for our segment, this segment of the show, which has been all about the BTR Boxing Podcast Awards. So now we're going to move into the next segment of the show, and it's really all about our own personal thoughts and feelings and opinions about 2022. We've spent most of the episode talking about fights and fighters and different categories and the prestigious awards. We're handing out awards like WBC hands out their belts these days, but I'm telling you, it's been a great year for us personally when it comes down to the podcast. And I suppose when we do with these end of year shows, we like to really reflect upon how the year has been for us as podcasters as well, and it's been a quite a decent year for us, really. I mean, with this time sort of last year, we was assessing where we were, and we was looking at the way things had progressed for us, and the shows and the way the shows were doing, and how people were really starting to latch onto things. And it's been really nice this year that so many more people have found us, and so many more listeners are tuning into us, and it's fantastic that people are enjoying the shows so much that they give us shout outs on social media. And obviously we've got the Patreon membership service, which we've got some really loyal people there that have been supporting us, and it's just really nice when we get the messages come through. And even on YouTube, of course, one of the biggest things that we've mentioned a couple of times is the fact that this year the YouTube channel got over 1,000 subscribers, and it also hit the required watch hours to be able to monetize the channel. So as a result of that, we've been able to monetize the channel and actually start to earn a little bit of money off YouTube. And it's really nice because of all the dedication and the hours and the time we spend prepping, the time we spend recording and editing, and everything we try to do to make it as professional as possible and to make it an enjoyable story for you guys and an enjoyable listen. And something that you can be doing when you're cleaning or you're driving or you're working or whatever it is. It's just been a really great year, and for me, I've enjoyed the sort of transition of the start of the year, finishing off the sort of darker side of boxing season 2, and then coming into the preparations for Legendary Nights in the summer, and then recording Legendary Nights, and having people like Teresa Tapia come on the show, and Lukey doing the after show has been a really great addition for the year. And there's not really been one particular standout moment in terms of what we do, because we absolutely enjoy all of it. We enjoy recording, we enjoy putting it out there, we enjoy the reactions to the show, and we just thoroughly enjoy this as a hobby and a passion. And it's just so nice that we get so much feedback now from people that really enjoy it. And it's surprisingly, given the world of social media and the trolls that are out there, we get quite limited amount of negative feedback, which is quite unusual, to be honest with you. Not that I'm complaining about that, but it is unusual because there is always people out there that are trying to they look at other shows and they maybe get a bit envious or jealous of how people are doing or the perception of how people are doing. And it's just been dead nice to understand that this actually helps other people. It sort of is therapeutic for us as well in what we do. So it's just nice to know that there's that many people out there that really enjoy it. And a lot of the people that listen to it are not even from the UK, which is also amazing. Like, we're touching people in Canada, not literally touching, by the way. We're actually reaching out and touching people in Canada, in the US, in Australia, in Sweden, in New Zealand, in all these different countries in the world. And you guys just love listening to us and love listening to what we've got to say about certain fights and fighters, and of course all the storytelling elements of what we do in the podcast. So it's just been such an amazing year to recap on, and I'm going to hand it over to you really to let you have your thoughts on this and say what you want to say, Johnston, because I know when I talk about it, I probably come across like I'm talking about it with great passion and pride, and honestly, it really warms my heart and fills my heart with joy to be able to produce shows that people are listening to and enjoying. And yeah, it's just great, and I'm just really happy that we've had a good year progressively as a podcast, and that people are still really enjoying us.
And I absolutely agree with you there. Look, at the end of the day, we are two fellas that just enjoy watching boxing, and we do love the history of the sport, and because of our enthusiasm with the sport and the history of the sport, not so much just the current stuff, which a lot of podcasts do. We like to be able to bring people a story in terms of what happened in yesteryear and way back. And our patrons are lucky enough and fortunate for the minute that we are doing boxing through the decades, literally from 1900s all the way up, even before 1900s, to be fair, all the way up to this current day. So yeah, just a little plug there for anyone that isn't a patron that's listening and would like to be able to listen to that stuff. But the grind and the day-to-day stuff of boxing, that's what this show was all about looking at this year and which fighters did well and who didn't. But I mean, the one thing is we always love it, Sean. We go back to our stuff we do, our career profiles, our legendary nights, and our dark side of boxing, which is going to be back at the beginning of next year. And looking, we've looked at a lot of boxers, and we've gone through the year and give our theories and who we believe were the best fighters this year and who deserved the awards and who didn't. But for us ourselves, looking at where we started last year to where we are now, I think we've made huge strides. I think we would probably be in a contender to be fighter of the year, to be honest with you. That's just my opinion. We love it. We enjoy it. And so, as long as it keeps reaching out to you guys and we're getting positive feedback, which we are, very few times we ever get bad publicity. Maybe we'll slip up on the odd thing. But I think people now that listen to us understand that, we do this because we love the sport, not necessarily because we consider ourselves to be historians or experts on the sport. It's more to do with the fact that we love it and we want to present you with stories and present you with our theories and our analysis on certain fights over the weekend and stuff. And people seem to like it. So that's great. But yeah, we do not pretend to be experts because we certainly ain't that. But we are getting better. We are, in terms of myself and yourself, Sean, we present shows a little bit better than we used to, and compared to 12 months ago, I think we've made huge strides. Just to say, I mean, we've had 7 episodes of the career profiles this year. Next year we will be hitting 10. We're adamant we're going to have 10 career profiles out. We want 10 more legendary nights. We want 10 more darker side of boxing. So that's going to be the aim for us, as well as presenting you with the current stuff in the boxing world. And so look, I just want to say it's been a pleasure working with you, Sean, and we'll continue to do so. Hopefully we can progress and get better. So if anyone's got any ideas of how we can do that, then we'd love to listen to you. Constructive criticism we're all for. You want to call us a bunch of cunts and we're not worth it, then we don't really listen to that. But we love you.
yeah. We tend not to listen to that. No, we do. We genuinely listen to all feedback. At the end of the day, we're not experts. We're not working in this field on a full-time basis. Albeit we'd love to produce more shows on a full-time basis. But the reality of that is, we know the reality. The reality is we have to be financed by somebody or a company who is able to then say, look, we can pay your wages every month. You just keep producing content. It's a very hard gig doing this, and it's not there's very few in boxing that really do make it to a certain level, and I feel like all the work we've put in over the past few years together has certainly got us to a level where it actually is providing us with a little bit of finance that is able to help the show, but it's also able to give us a reward for the hard work that we've put in. So that's really in part to us joining up with the Sports Social Podcast Network. And I know they've brought on a lot of podcasts in the past 12 months since we've been there. And, you know, I was a little bit apprehensive. I thought it might have been too good to be true, but actually it's been brilliant. It's been brilliant how it's helped us. It's helped us grow. It's helped us outsource things, as we always say. We've been able to pay people to do things for us rather than us struggling till 1-2 o'clock in the morning trying to put videos together. And, you know, the grind of what you have to do in boxing media, it's taken some of that stress away from us and allowed us to focus solely on the research and the actual recording and editing of episodes rather than us worrying about, when we're going to get a tweet out or when we're going to get a Facebook post out. Now it's just all about getting the content recorded and delivering it so you guys actually get the experience of that content. And, you know, we're putting out 2 to 3 shows every single week, and next year's going to be no different. And if I've got any aims for next year, really, it'll just be to try and include a few more interviews from my side, really, and just try and add some more content in that regard. But to be honest, you know, I know what people love, and that's the series-based content. So with that in mind, you know, our primary focus is on making sure that we deliver some great stories, some great storytelling, and some really great moments for you to recall and remember and reflect upon. But the one thing I want to say as well, completely off topic now, as we've just been talking about our year, when we did our awards a little bit earlier, we talked about most controversial moments of the year. And this always happens to us in the sense that we'll do something, we'll record something, and then we'll completely forget about something, and then we'll go, oh damn, I forgot to talk about that on the show. Well, this time we haven't forgotten about it. One of the most controversial moments this year that we've had a right laugh about, Anthony Joshua having that, it's not funny that he had a little bit of a mental breakdown in the ring, but it was just weird, weren't it? It was just a weird moment, and I think
really weird.
It certainly is a controversial moment because it was like Joshua being like a snake shedding his skin. It was like he was shedding that corporate skin of his in the ring that night after all the frustrations of losing the fight after he tried his best against Usyk, and he just sort of said a lot of things that he felt, but then it also felt a little bit like, you know, he was going a bit too far. But it was controversial, man. It really was. When you look back on it, it was like nobody's seen this from Joshua in 10 years of him being around, you know, in the amateur game, in the Olympics, to the pros, and we'd not seen any of this. And I think the fact that we seen it was just a bit of a shock to a lot of people. And for some of us, it was like we knew this was the real Joshua. It was just a case of when will this really come to the surface? And I think all the frustrations and probably the difficulties he's had inside and outside of the ring over the last few years really sort of came to the forefront. So I just wanted to make sure that I threw that in here at the end, because, you know, when people listen to the show and they go, oh, you didn't mention this, you didn't mention that, and a lot of it really for us is about what we personally felt as opposed to sort of trying to encapsulate everything, because like I said, we'd be here for hours on end, and do you really want to be consuming a 3-hour podcast on an end of year show? I know you probably don't, because I'm sure I wouldn't want to do that if I was listening to someone else's podcast. I want a sort of short and sharp and bit of a quick analysis on each thing. At the end of the day, like we said, we're not experts. If you want to go and listen to experts, then you'll go and listen to the expert podcasts, the guys that are getting paid full time to do this sort of stuff. But if you want to listen to sort of a true fan orientated podcast, then this is why you're here listening to us. And yeah, we have a little bit of knowledge here and there, and you know, we've got some great knowledge based from our history stuff that we've done. So yeah, I think we're definitely getting better. We might not be experts, but we're certainly not a casual fan or just a general fan. I think we're just a little bit more than that these days, Johnston, than just
I think we are, and I think just interrupted there. I think, you know, with the experts, I think you're talking about, I'm not going to say any names, but I think the fact of the matter is that those experts tend to be aligned with certain different promoters and different managers and different TV companies, and therefore may not want to stray beyond saying certain things about certain moments throughout the year when they probably wanted to say more because they want to keep their job. So the beauty of us and our situation is that we can say what the hell we want. That's great.
Yeah, it is the beauty of it. I mean, we try our best to be as less foul language as possible, but there are moments, certainly from your side, Johnston, where I think things do get the better of you. But it's just passion, man. I know it's passion. Yeah. I know that's what it is. It's passion for the sport. It's passion for moments or people or whatever it is. And like you say, you couldn't really get away with that if you was working for DAZN or for BT Sport or presenting somewhere else. So I suppose, as you said, that is the benefit of us having our podcast and being able to sort of relate to people like us, really, just normal guys that just go to work, have a family, enjoy the sport, want to talk about the sport, and give our thoughts and feelings and opinions on it, and obviously do a little bit more than that. So with that in mind, I think it's really now time to give our sort of thank yous out for the year, I suppose. And for me, the first big thank you of the year will be to all you guys listening, all you guys and girls from all different places of the world, all these different countries and languages, and we translate to you, and it's amazing, still amazing to me that we have all these different people listening. So a big thank you to you for continuing to listen to us. If you're relatively new to this podcast, then a big thank you for sticking by, listening to us, bearing with us, finding out that we've got more than just this content like everybody else does, finding out we've got all this other content out there. And if you've listened to us and you've not realised by now that we've got all this other content, then I think it's about time you go and have a quick look at it, because we've got some absolutely brilliant stuff out there. And I will say brilliant stuff, and I will pat ourselves on the back, because it's some absolutely fantastic things that we've produced out there over the last few years, and it is a crime, literally a crime, if you don't go and tune into it and listen to the stuff that we've put out there, because it is absolutely brilliant. And many people within the sport, many ex-professionals or professionals or family of people that are no longer with us that have been in the sport, have always commented on how passionate we are and how much we love it. So, for you guys listening, thank you so much for listening to us all this year and beyond, and the support is absolutely appreciated. But that also goes to the patrons of this podcast, those that go the extra mile by providing us with a little bit of financial support, but in return are getting additional benefits, of course, because of that. So a big thank you to all you patrons, and we have done a specific message for you on Patreon, so if you haven't caught it yet, please go and check out Patreon, because I have recorded a specific message for you guys, just because of the fact that you're actually going above and beyond the average listener, which is to put your hand in your pocket and support us. And again, that support has allowed us to be able to pay for different things that have allowed us to create better stories and more accurate stories and brilliant podcasts and great videos. And without that support, it just makes the job 10 times harder. And what we want to do is give you one of the best podcasts out there, and I know there's a few people that do say that about us, and we're quite humble in saying that. We know we're decent, but are we really one of the best out there? I know there's a few people that have their own preferences to podcasts, but, we just love what we do. And as long as people keep listening, that's all that matters to us. And as long as we keep enjoying it, that's all that matters to us. So, a big thank you to all the patrons for all your support. And if you haven't become a patron yet, and you're in a position to do so, and you've got a little bit of spare cash, and I mean literally only a couple of quid or a couple of dollars, wherever you're based, you can go onto Patreon and have a look at the membership services that we do. And we do offer ad-free versions of all the episodes on there. We do have early access to all the series-based content. When you sign up to the Patreon membership, you also get access to the series-based content when it gets released on the first day. We give you at least 3 of the 10 episodes that we put out there, so that's a great bonus as well. We do Patreon only content at least once a month, albeit we haven't done it this month because it's been really busy with the darker side of boxing. But as Johnston said, we've got Boxing Through the Decades, which we've started, an exclusive Patreon only series out there. So please, if you are interested in looking at some additional content, early access to episodes, ad-free episodes, special things that we can do on there for you guys for the support that you're giving us, then check us out at patreon.com/BTR Boxing Podcast Network. And as always, just to sign off with the socials, you can find us at BTR Boxing Pod on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on TikTok. If you've not subscribed to the podcast in a traditional way, you can do it via Apple, via Google, via Spotify, or just search us up in the podcast app of your choice and you'll still be able to find all our shows. Just make sure you hit that subscribe button to get all the latest available episodes direct to your phone, tablet or smart device, and you will be able to tune in to all the latest content that we're putting out there. But Johnston, just a final word from you before we sign off from the end of year show 2022.
Yeah, I just want to echo your statements there to the patron guys. I mean, to you guys listening as well that are not patrons. Obviously, if you're downloading and listening to this, you're helping us. So, if you are those, you're not a patron, you just like listening to the show, then give us some star ratings or give us some comments on Apple or something. If you can hit up a 5-star for us rating on there, that'd be great. If you can jump on YouTube and subscribe and support us and put some comments in and let us know your thoughts, that'd be even better as well. Just want to say thank you to everybody that listens, and obviously the patrons who are close to our hearts. They're like, end of the day, when I think of the patrons, I think their guys are a part of this show, aren't they, Sean? They are helping They're helping us. They're part of the team, effectively. So if you want to become a part of BTR Boxing Podcast Network, then be a patron, join in, give us your thoughts, help us out, and we'll always plug you. We'll always mention your names. We'll always follow you and on socials and whatever else, and we'll help you out for whatever you want to. If you help us out, we'll help you out. That's just how it works, isn't it? And as Sean's said, and as I've said, this is just through the love of sport. We don't do this because of financial gain. We are gradually getting to a point where we can outsource stuff, but we're not actually. It's not life changing. We can't quit our jobs. The aim is eventually to be in a position where we could do that. I mean, that's probably a few years down the line, but that's the aim. And if we can get to that point, and who knows where we can go. So it's not necessarily a selfish thing where me and Sean want to be famous or anything. We don't. We just enjoy what we do, and if we could enjoy something you're doing and get paid for it, then that'd be fantastic. But yeah, be a patron, join the team, be a part of BTR Boxing. But for the guys that already are, just enough love to you guys. I can't honestly tell you enough how much you're helping us. So yeah, Merry Christmas to you all. Enjoy your Christmases. I know it's a difficult time, so do your best, just enjoy it. It's all about the money and the presents. It's about just being with the family and having time with those loved ones around you. I've lost people through the years, so not having those people around in my life it's always a difficult time. So anyone that's going through any shit, you're more than welcome to hit us up. We're always there to listen to people and talk to people. But I know how hard it is. It can be really tough this time of year. It's never easy. All you hear is these songs as well, these same old Christmas songs, and it just makes you realize that, not everyone's having a great time. Sometimes it's a bit tricky. So if we can present you a story that may take a couple of hours out of your day that helps you, then that's, like Sean said, that's close to our heart. That's what helps us, and that's what keeps us going. That's what's kept us going. And so yeah, have a Merry Christmas to all you guys. Enough wishes to all your family, and just be healthy, be safe, and enjoy it the best you can.
I echo those thoughts and feelings. Thank you, everybody, for listening this year in 2022. You've been amazing. It's been amazing to watch the progression of the podcast and see all the support that we've had. Have a wonderful Christmas with your family. Make sure you spend and savour those most precious moments, because we will never get these moments back in life. And I always say, make the most of it. So please take care. Have a safe Christmas. Don't drink and drive, whatever you do. Please get a taxi home if you're having a really good bender over Christmas as well. Make sure you stay safe, have a great time, and of course have a wonderful new year. And we will be back in the new year, of course, with our boxing wish list for 2023, the start of Darker Side of Boxing on the 16th of January, and many more great episodes to come throughout the year. Have a wonderful Christmas and a happy new year.